Abraham Shakespeare. 40-year-old Abraham Shakespeare spent two of his last $5 on lottery tickets at a convenience store in Frostproof, Florida in 2006. The decision took him from being a laborer of modest means to unimaginably rich in the blink of an eye. He won $30 million, taking home a grand total of $17 million after taxes. Shakespeare upgraded to a nicer home in a gated community, but for the most part he kept his spending impressively in check, at least when it came to himself. He bought a Honda and a Rolex from a pawn shop, but he was quick to splurge when someone asked him for help. However, the constant requests for money got tiring, and at one point Shakespeare told his brother that he would have been better off if he'd never won the lottery in the first place. A local businesswoman named Doris Donegan D.D. Moore noticed Shakespeare's growing frustration. She offered to ease the burden by managing his money for him, and because Shakespeare trusted her and thought she had his best interests at heart, he eagerly obliged. He mysteriously disappeared though in 2009, leading his loved ones to wonder if he'd gotten fed up with the stresses of his fortune and skipped town without telling anyone. But they grew increasingly worried when months went by with no word from Shakespeare, and they eventually reported him missing. In the meantime, D.D. Moore had become the proud owner of several new vehicles and went on a vacation. She dodged Shakespeare's relatives, who'd become suspicious of her possible involvement in his disappearance, telling them that she'd helped him skip town after he told her he wanted to escape people's constant nagging for money. In early 2010, a police tip led to the discovery of Shakespeare's remains in Moore's yard. By then, his lottery winnings had disappeared entirely, but it's not exactly clear what happened to all the money. After the remains were found, Moore changed her story and claimed that she killed Shakespeare in self-defense. In the end, she was charged and convicted of first-degree murder and is now serving life without parole. Moore maintained her innocence throughout the case and continues to do so from behind bars. 7. Evelyn Adams. When New Jersey resident Evelyn Adams won millions in the state's lottery jackpot twice in 1985, she found it impossible to avoid the spotlight or resume any semblance of a normal life. The convenience store clerk won a total of $5.4 million, which is the equivalent of over $15 million today when adjusted for inflation. After winning her first prize of $3.9 million, Adams paid bills, bought a new car, set up a college fund for her daughter, and helped friends and family who suddenly came out of the woodwork with their hands held out. She gave away a substantial amount of the winnings and later told the New York Times that the lottery didn't change her, but it did change the people around her. Adams also increased her weekly spending on lottery tickets from $25 to $100, paving the way to a devastating addiction that would eventually suck her dry of nearly every last penny to her name. She initially planned to use the rest of the money, which was doled out in annual payments of around $174,000 after taxes, to pursue an education and better her life in other ways. However, she put college on hold while she waited for her daughter to finish high school and instead focused on remodeling her home. Both she and her fiancé quit working for a while, but her partner soon became bored and got a job. Instead of doing the same, Adams began blowing money on slot machines in Atlantic City. She also made some poor business decisions that ended up costing her a lot of money. By 2012, the lottery winnings were gone, and she was struggling to get by while living in a trailer park. 6. Lobsang Darji. Former Buddhist monk Lobsang Darji began a new life in the US in 1997 after escaping political turmoil in Tibet. He unapologetically clawed his way from the very bottom to as high as he could possibly get on the socio-economic ladder, marrying the sister of tennis legend Andre Agassi. He relied on her connections and wealth as a cornerstone for his real estate empire. With the Agassi name at his fingertips, Darji had an easy time drumming up generous funding from investors. He also benefited from the federal government's EB-5 program, which provides incentives to immigrants who invest in a commercial enterprise that creates jobs in America. Much of Darji's funding came from Chinese investors seeking to establish permanent residency in the US through their involvement with his projects, some of whom sold everything they owned to bank on their dreams of starting over halfway around the globe. However, much of the $240 million in funding that Darji collected was diverted into businesses and failing personal projects that didn't qualify for the EB-5 program. He also spent it on personal indulgences, including a sprawling mansion in Bellevue, Washington, and a Bentley. To cover up any discrepancies and to obtain a $25 million loan to supplement his reckless spending, he falsified bank statements to make the numbers appear like everything was fine. But the Securities and Exchange Commission wasn't fooled, and in 2015, the agency filed a civil lawsuit against Darji and successfully petitioned in court to freeze his assets. Sadly, as a direct result of his misappropriation of funds, his nearly 300 foreign investors' applications for green cards were denied. Thankfully, most of them recouped their funds and were later approved for permanent residency in the States. Darji was criminally charged and ultimately pleaded guilty to 2 felony fraud-related counts. He was released from prison in 2019 after serving part of a 4-year sentence. 5. Andre Rebello. When 58-year-old Colleen Rebello was found dead in her Perth, Australia home in 2020, investigators didn't initially suspect foul play. But they began to second-guess how she died when her son, 26-year-old cryptocurrency dealer Andre Rebello, landed at the center of a fraud investigation. Unfortunately, it was too late to perform a second autopsy. Colleen had been cremated against her wishes thanks to a forged last will and testament that detectives believe Andre is responsible for. Andre is the longtime partner of influencer Gracie Piscopo, whose modeling career has been going strong for years after becoming a social media sensation. And, by all appearances, Andre seems plenty successful on his own. But for some reason, it appears as though he may have wanted to get his hands on his mum's money and assets, as well as a $500,000 life insurance payout. More than 2 years after Colleen's death, authorities charge Andre with murder along with a series of fraud charges. In addition to allegedly forging her will, he's accused of forging medical documents, his mother's death certificate, and a record of investigation into her death. He remains behind bars while the case proceeds, and Piscopo has wiped any trace of him from her social media. 4. Ephraim Diveroli and David Pacus. Working out of a tiny apartment in Miami, Ephraim Diveroli established a small fortune as a weapons contractor for the US Department of Defense. He started his business, AEY Inc., by winning small contracts, and over time he established the reputation he needed in order to start landing larger jobs. By 18 years old, Diveroli was a legitimate, self-made millionaire. He took on a business partner named David Pacus, and in 2007, the pair landed a $298 million contract with the Pentagon to provide munitions and arms to Allied troops fighting in Afghanistan. They soon realized that they bit off more than they could chew when they found themselves unable to deliver everything promised in the contract. Diveroli and Pacus began taking illegal shortcuts to get the job done, namely by using banned Chinese supplies. They repackaged the goods, removed any evidence of their origins, and sent the packages on their way. In the meantime, the young men shamelessly enjoyed the influx of cash that the contract brought them, indulging in cars, homes, designer clothing, and of course, drugs and women. As the business continued to grow, what started out as a respectable law-abiding company essentially became an arms smuggling organization that operated right under the federal government's nose. However, the feds eventually caught on to the scam after noticing a decline in the quality of AEY's products and a growing list of contracts that it had failed to follow through on. By sending junky equipment and failing to honor deadlines, the pair showed not only a disturbing level of greed, but an unconscionable disregard for the safety of Americans serving overseas. Around the same time, Pacus and Diveroli's business relationship became strained, creating the perfect conditions for them to act against each other in a legal case. Pacus was the first to flip, and he ended up pleading guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States. He served 7 months of house arrest in exchange for his cooperation, while Diveroli received a 4-year prison sentence for the same charge. 3. Alex Lazarev. Childhood was rough for Alex Lazarev, who was raised outside Toronto by a destitute single mother who suffered from volatile mood swings and other issues. He ran away at 15 and periodically came back to visit in hopes that his mother had changed. However, he was left disappointed every time and continued to bounce back and forth between the streets and youth hostels. Alex was just 18 years old when his mother passed away, leaving him with mixed feelings of grief and relief after struggling for so many years with their painful relationship. He later wrote in The Guardian that he was shocked to learn that she quietly stashed money away and invested in real estate while they lived in what seemed like abject poverty. He also found out that he was to inherit $1 million. Overnight, Alex went from living in squalor to living in a luxury penthouse. He later wrote that at his age, he had no business handling the amount of money in his possession. In addition to blowing it senselessly, he naively helped out anybody who asked and made some miscalculated investments and ill-conceived business decisions that ultimately resulted in major losses. He also bought a car for a stripper who, in his words, didn't stick around long. As Alex slowly began to realize the money doesn't grow on trees, depression set in. 4 years after receiving the inheritance, he essentially ended up right back at square one, on the streets. Since then, he's carved out a stable living performing comedy around the world, recounting his traumatic experiences with a healthy dose of cathartic humor. 2. Graham Roos. To some people, $750,000 isn't a lot of money, but it was more than a small fortune to 26-year-old Graham Roos, who came from a working-class family and inherited the funds in the early 90s from a great aunt who'd married into wealth. Even before his aunt passed away, he struggled to hold jobs because he knew money was eventually coming his way and apparently planned to live off it. Roos was even more thrilled when he received the inheritance, and it was a lot more money than he expected. He blew through the money at an alarming rate, spending it on lavish vacations, a luxury flat, drugs, and privately chartered flights. In a refreshingly honest article for The Independent, written 2 years after he received the payout, Roos admitted that he'd stupidly squandered his inheritance and that a lot of it was spent on entertaining people who probably didn't even genuinely like him. When he realized that the money wasn't going to last forever, his mental health began to spiral out of control. Roos finally came to the conclusion that he'd taken his newfound fortune for granted and that he had little, if anything, to show for it. His self-esteem hit an all-time low, while his finances simultaneously plummeted to rock bottom, and he was forced to start over from scratch with a job at a laundromat. But Roos didn't regret the experience. Rather, it taught him about the things that matter most in life, like family and having the basics covered. He was thankful that his parents never judged him for his wanton spending, even though his mum said she knew he would waste the money. 1. Keisha Williams. As the telemarketing industry exploded and showed signs of going nowhere but up, a Virginia woman named Keisha Williams jumped at her chance to get a piece of the pie. She solicited loans from investors, telling them about the state-of-the-art software she'd purchased that would facilitate remote doctor's visits at a time when such a thing barely existed. Williams explained the software was being held in escrow in Austria until she paid taxes and fees on it, and promised investors a 30 to 100% return on their money. Many people pounced on the chance to take advantage of the unheard-of rate and forked over as much money as they could afford. Altogether, she raised around $5 million. But Williams only put a small portion of the funds towards the software. She blew most of it traveling the world, eating at fancy restaurants, and on luxury designer clothing and accessories. When she wasn't traveling, she was living in high-end hotels in and around Washington, D.C., using her actual apartment as little more than a walk-in closet for her ill-gotten wardrobe. But it was later revealed that roughly $272,000 went to a lawyer in Austria who Williams paid to forge documents to make her scam appear legitimate. The law eventually caught up with Williams, who ultimately pleaded guilty to 14 fraud-related counts in 2015. She traded in her designer duds for a prison uniform, which she'll be wearing until she finishes serving a 15.5-year prison sentence.
8. Gabby Castillo. In early 2022, 26-year-old influencer Gabby Castillo was arrested in Mexico City for being a suspected member of the elusive Union Tepito gang. At the time, Castillo had over 763,000 Instagram followers. But by looking at her online content, you wouldn't have guessed she'd be involved in illegal activities. According to the Spanish news outlet El Universal, Castillo was arrested on fraud and drug offense charges. The incident occurred when the reality star was in the process of starting a singing career under the stage name Briella Sanz. She was apprehended while traveling through Mexico City in her luxurious pickup truck while possessing around 1 million Mexican pesos, $52,961 US. 35-year-old Jose Yaref Soto Jimenez, whose family is suspected of stealing and reselling expensive used cars, accompanied the influencer. And what's even worse is that the authorities discovered hundreds of bags of drugs, as well as a firearm inside the vehicle. On top of other offenses that were brought against her, Castillo was investigated for allegedly taking compromising photographs of her clients that could have been used to blackmail them for money. She also has romantic ties to Oscar Andres Flores Ramirez, or El Lunares as he's sometimes called, who's currently serving a 20-year sentence for murder, selling drugs, and organized crime. El Lunares is supposedly the head of the Union Tepito gang, which is the main reason Castillo has been linked to the illegal group. The investigation into this case is ongoing, and no recent updates have been released. So it's unclear if Castillo really is a member of the gang or just involved with the group's dangerous leader. 7. Kayla Massa. New Jersey-based social media influencer Kayla Massa was accused of fraud after she allegedly scammed her followers on Instagram out of more than $1 million in 2018. Massa has over 330,000 followers on the platform, and she supposedly duped more than 45 people into sharing their bank account information with her. The whole scam was exposed in a detailed report from Quartz. Allegedly, Massa lured people into her illegal scheme via her Instagram stories, where the woman would upload aspirational photos of cash, along with messages such as, "If you got a bank account and you're interested in making legal money, hit me up ASAP." And not surprisingly, the majority of people who fell for the scam were under the age of 18. According to official documents, Massa was accused of encouraging those individuals to completely empty their bank accounts before giving up their debit information and PIN in order to falsely allay any fear of losing money. Then she'd have her victims deposit large, fraudulent checks into the accounts, all under the names of legitimate businesses, before hastily withdrawing the cash. She allegedly moved so fast that neither the individuals nor the banks had time to flag the transactions as suspicious. After draining her victims' accounts, she would cut off all contact with them, even going as far as to block them on social media. And many of them were forced to pay the money back to the companies that were targeted during the scam, or had their cards canceled altogether. Some of the businesses that were used for the fraudulent checks also experienced losses. The investigation was launched back in July 2018, after the U.S. Postal Service found out that 53 blank money orders had been taken from the post office in Berlin, New Jersey. An update from February 2020 claims that Massa was charged along with 9 other people who were believed to have been involved in the scam. Massa, as well as the other defendants, were charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud. The estimated loss as a result of the scheme was estimated to exceed $1.5 million. Unfortunately, the outcome of this case is unclear, as it seems that Massa and her co-conspirators have yet to be sentenced for their crimes. 6. King Sid. YouTuber King Sid was arrested in early 2022 at a gas station in southern Florida after misusing 911 in order to pull a prank on the police. Sid, whose legal name is Jason Sid, posted footage of the incident to his YouTube channel after the fact. In the video, the influencer can be seen telling a friend to call the local police to report weird, suspicious activities that were taking place at the gas station. They claimed that a car in the parking lot was loaded with cocaine. However, the vehicle they'd reported to the dispatcher was really occupied by Sid and his buddies, and the truck was filled with Coca-Cola, not the illegal drug. The video that Sid recorded was titled "Coke Prank on Aggressive Cops," and since it was posted, it's been viewed more than 800,000 times on the platform. The Coral Springs police chief, Clyde Perry, posted a video to Twitter in which he said that he was offended by the absolute waste of resources the prank caused. He also explained that the whole scheme was hatched as a way to show how overly aggressive some police officers are when responding to these types of calls. But the YouTuber's plan backfired in the end because the officers couldn't have acted more professionally during their investigation of the fictitious situation. And after the vehicle's trunk was searched and nothing illegal was discovered, Sid and his accomplices were free to leave. According to Chief Perry, a total of 7 emergency calls were delayed due to the prank. He also said that this type of behavior often leads to deadly consequences and shouldn't be considered funny. But Perry seemed to have the last laugh as he captioned a video of King Sid getting arrested. The joke's on him. The 21-year-old was subsequently charged with misuse of 911, which is a third-degree felony. The 2 other people involved in the foolish prank weren't identified, so it's unclear if they were also apprehended. Sid has yet to be sentenced for the crime since the case is ongoing. 5. Courtney Clenny. OnlyFans model Courtney Clenny was arrested in Hawaii on August 10, 2022, after being accused of murdering her boyfriend, Christian Obumseli, on April 3rd at the home they shared together in Florida. Clenny, who used the stage name Courtney Taylor for her X-rated content, apparently admitted to stabbing Obumseli. However, she told investigators that she was only acting in self-defense. Initially, the police agreed with the 26-year-old, but after further investigation, the authorities charged her with second-degree murder at the end of 2022. Frank Prieto, Clenny's lawyer, seemed all too confident when he came out with a statement that said he was looking forward to clearing his client's name, even claiming to be completely shocked to hear of the woman's arrest. This incident occurred after footage emerged during the summer of 2021 that showed Clenny attacking Obumseli in an elevator inside their apartment building. The surveillance camera footage was eerily recorded just a month before the man was killed. Clenny told the police that she threw the knife at her boyfriend from 10 feet, 3 meters away. But according to the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office, Obumseli sustained a knife wound that was 3 inches, 7.6 centimeters deep, which they claimed could only be caused by forceful pressure. The OnlyFans model, who made over $1.8 million in 2021, has pleaded not guilty to the charges brought against her. At the moment, she's being held in a Miami jail as she awaits her trial. 4. Ray Hushpuppi. 40-year-old Ramon Abbas, who's better known to his millions of followers on Instagram as Ray Hushpuppi, was sentenced to 11 years behind bars over charges related to a multi-million-dollar scam he created that targeted companies in the US and overseas. He was arrested for his crimes in June 2020 at his apartment in Dubai. The Nigerian social media influencer flaunted an extravagant lifestyle of luxury cars and private jets to his fans, all while claiming to be a real estate developer. But in reality, Abbas was making his money illegally through online hacking schemes that reportedly earned him over $24 million. The cybercriminals' targets included a foreign bank, an American law firm, and an unnamed professional soccer club in Britain, according to a federal sentencing memorandum from the Central District of California's U.S. Attorney's Office. After getting caught, Abbas confessed to a conspiracy to defraud a Qatari businessman out of over $1 million. He also detailed how he and his co-conspirators fraudulently acquired $923,000 from the law firm in New York he'd tricked into giving up their bank information. One of the man's accomplices, who hasn't been named, pleaded guilty to one count of money laundering in November 2020. He's now also serving 11 years in a federal prison and is required to pay over $30 million in restitution. The previous June, investigators in the United Arab Emirates searched Abbas's apartment at the Palazzo Versace resort in Dubai. Afterward, he was arrested and was subsequently handed over to FBI agents. At the scene, the authorities reportedly seized 13 luxury cars, almost $41 million, and computer and phone evidence related to the crime, like the email addresses of Abbas's possible victims. On top of his 11-year sentence, Abbas was ordered to pay $1.7 million in restitution to 2 of his fraud victims. 3. James Charles. Beauty influencer James Charles admitted in 2021 to sending several sexually explicit messages to not 1, but 2 underage boys. The then 21-year-old initially denied the allegations against him. However, he ended up posting a video to YouTube in which he explained that he fully understood his actions and how they were wrong. James, who currently has nearly 24 million subscribers on the platform, was accused of grooming by one of the teenagers he was caught messaging. But James said he only flirted with them because he believed they were 18. Even so, many of his followers would not allow his behavior to go unnoticed, stating that he should have done more research before sending inappropriate messages. After receiving an insane amount of backlash for his behavior and losing hundreds of subscribers on YouTube amidst the scandal, James posted a 14-minute video titled, "Holding Myself Accountable." In the video, he confessed to acting reckless in the past, but said he only behaved that way because he was desperate, which many of his followers took as him trying to justify his actions. His excuses, though, didn't do much to persuade his audience, since he had a similar scandal happen back in 2019, when he made a promise to be more careful moving forward. Obviously, he was unable to stick to his word. Oddly enough, there were never any real charges brought against James. 2. Taylor Frankie Paul. Harriman, Utah influencer Taylor Frankie Paul was arrested in early 2023 after getting accused of assault. Paul has done well for herself on TikTok, amassing over 4 million followers on the app. But when a 911 call was placed on February 17th at about 11 p.m., accusing the woman of domestic violence, she was quickly apprehended by the Harriman police. One of Paul's neighbors reported the incident after hearing yelling and screaming coming from inside the influencer's home, according to a probable cause statement. When the authorities arrived at the woman's residence, officers spoke with both Paul and the victim at the doorway. They were then questioned about the reported commotion, which is when the victim explained what had happened. This seemed to anger Paul, who then lashed out at the victim, hitting and punching him right in front of the police, who ended up separating the two of them. Eventually, though, Paul was determined to be the primary aggressor of the argument. It was reported that the 28-year-old woman struck the victim several times during the argument. She also allegedly threw multiple household objects at him, including her 5-year-old daughter's wooden playset and metal chairs. Unfortunately, Paul's child had been on the couch in the living room during the altercation, and video evidence that was received after the influencer's arrest seems to suggest that the woman's daughter may have been injured during her mother's outburst. As a result, Taylor Frankie Paul was charged with criminal mischief, domestic violence in the presence of a child, and assault. The case is also currently being screened by the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office to see if additional charges of reckless child abuse are necessary. The investigation is ongoing at the moment, but hopefully in the near future, more details will be revealed. 1. Danielle Miller. Danielle Miller, an influencer from Florida, was arrested in 2021 on wire fraud charges after flaunting her lavish lifestyle on social media. 32-year-old Miller was accused of using a Massachusetts resident's information in order to open a fake bank account. Then, after doing so, she applied for a COVID-19 relief loan using the fraudulent credentials she'd come to possess. As a result, she received a loan of over $100,000 as part of a federal program that was meant to aid small businesses during the global pandemic. However, according to investigators, the money she acquired was used to purchase expensive plane tickets and stays at luxurious hotels in California. At the time, Miller had a rather large following on Instagram, and prosecutors were able to use the photographs she posted against her. For example, the influencer's fraudulent bank account was charged at least $5,000 by the Petite Hermitage Hotel, and just a few days later, she posted a picture that geotagged the establishment. In March 2023, Miller pled guilty to fraudulently obtaining more than $1 million in loans related to the pandemic by using the stolen identities of over 10 individuals. Then, using that money for personal expenses, such as chartering a private jet and renting a luxury apartment. Her sentencing hearing is currently scheduled for June 27, 2023.
Number 9. Nestle Monterroso. 27-year-old Guatemalan hip-hop star Nestle Monterroso famously started a freestyle rap movement dedicated to empowering women who want to pursue careers in the music industry, and she was also a dedicated animal rights activist. Monterroso was last seen alive in early of December of 2022, leaving an office she owned in Guatemala City. When the people in her life stopped hearing from her for an unusually long period of time, they reported her missing. According to the U.S. Sun, residents who lived near the building reported a suspicious car with no plates to the police 3 days after the missing persons report was made. Witnesses recalled seeing a group of people dropping off the vehicle at around 10:00 p.m. outside an automotive repair shop. Responding officers found Monterroso's body inside a barrel in the trunk of the vehicle. An autopsy revealed that she was murdered via blunt force trauma to the head. The barrel was reportedly secured with rope, and locals claimed on social media that the young woman's body bore signs of extreme violence and that the barrel contained some kind of liquid. Authorities declined to go into detail about a possible motive for the murder or any additional findings or leads that could perhaps help explain what happened to Monterroso. Number 8. Tommy Lee. Before she made headlines in 2018 for getting arrested twice in less than 24 hours, rapper, model, and reality star Tommy Lee was best known for starring in VH1's Love and Hip Hop Atlanta series, and for her occasional brushes with the law. In the first incident, she allegedly lashed out at one of her 2 kids at the child's middle school. She was charged with battery, aggravated assault, and child cruelty. Tommy Lee bonded out for $27,000 and was ordered to stay away from her daughter. But she was accused of breaking the order within 3 hours of her release, and she wound up back in custody later that day. The infamous Bad Girl was formally indicted on 7 charges including aggravated assault, child cruelty, battery, aggravated stalking, and disrupting a public school. If convicted of all 3 felonies and 4 misdemeanors, she could have faced 54 years in prison. In 2019, the judge overseeing Lee's case spared her from prison altogether. She pleaded guilty to 5 charges including cruelty to children and was sentenced to 10 years of probation. Lee was ordered to complete a residential recovery program followed by a year of aftercare and to submit to regular drug tests, pay a $1,000 fine, abide by a curfew, remain in the state of Georgia unless she has permission to travel, and to stay completely out of trouble until her probation is over. Keeping her nose clean may prove to be easier said than done for Lee, who has a lengthy criminal history and gave birth to her first child in jail. Number 7. Jam Master Jay. Brooklyn-born DJ Jason William Mizell, better known as Jam Master Jay, made a name for himself spinning the turntables for the legendary hip-hop group Run DMC. The group exploded onto the scene during the 1980s and is widely credited with helping to establish hip-hop as a mainstream music genre. He was just 37 years old when he was fatally gunned down at his music studio in Queens in 2002. Authorities suspected that Mizell's murder may have resulted from his failure to support an industry blacklist of the rapper 50 Cent, who wrote about the exploits of convicted drug lord Kenneth McGriff in his song Ghetto Quran. McGriff was close friends with the founders of Murder Inc. Records, so he had some enormous pull in the industry for someone who wasn't an actual musician. In 2003, investigative journalist Frank Owen uncovered evidence possibly tracing the murder to a drug deal gone bad. Mizell's career had largely petered out by the late 90s, and his music alone wasn't enough to pay the bills or his mounting debts to the IRS. To take in some badly needed cash, he allegedly turned to drug dealing. Sources claim that shortly before the murder, Mizell failed to make good on a debt for 22 pounds of cocaine after getting into a dispute with the two men he was doing business with. This allegation was detailed in a 2020 murder indictment against Ronald Washington and Carl Jordan Jr., who were scheduled to go to trial in 2023. According to the most recent update, a federal judge approved prosecutors' request to seat an anonymous jury due to safety concerns given the defendant's history of witness intimidation. If convicted, the pair will face life in prison without parole. Number 6. Kid Creole. 63-year-old hip-hop pioneer Nathaniel Glover, who goes by the stage name Kid Creole, rose to fame during the late 1970s as a member of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. The group's fame was iconic but short-lived, and they fell out of the spotlight decades before Glover resurfaced in the news headlines in 2017 for stabbing a homeless man to death. Surveillance footage showed Glover conversing with the victim, John Moley, in Midtown Manhattan before the pair disappeared off-screen, at which point Jolie was stabbed twice in the chest. Glover later told police that he was on his way to work when the incident happened. The two men didn't know each other, and he believed Jolie was coming on to him romantically. But Jolie was unarmed, and when Glover went on trial for murder, the judge told the jury to disregard any self-defense claims from his legal team. Glover was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and was sentenced to 16 years in prison, plus 5 years of post-release supervision. He'll be 71 years old when his earliest possible release date comes in 2031. Number 5. Tory Lanez. Canadian-born rapper Daystar Peterson, better known as Tory Lanez, was accused of shooting female rap star Megan Thee Stallion during an altercation in 2020. The pair were riding in an SUV in the Hollywood Hills together when they got into an argument, and things got personal when Megan insulted Lanez's music. As she walked away from the vehicle, Lanez allegedly fired his gun towards Megan's feet and yelled at her to dance. She underwent surgery to remove bullet fragments. Authorities arrested Lanez for the shooting, which he blamed on Megan's then best friend Kelsey Harris. According to Lanez, the women were fighting over him when he saw Harris pull a gun and tried to stop her from pulling the trigger. During closing arguments, his attorney George McDyson accused Megan of lying about everything in the case from the beginning and lying under oath. But the jury disagreed, and in 2022, Lanez was convicted of 3 gun-related charges, including assault with a firearm. He faces up to 22 years in prison, and he's awaiting sentencing. When the verdict was revealed, the 30-year-old's father began shouting at prosecutors, calling them evil, wicked people, and everyone was ordered to remain in the courtroom while he was removed. Number 4. Forrest Schaub. Known by the stage name DY, which stands for Die Young, Canadian rapper Forrest Schaub began making his own music and winning contests as a young teen. He scored a deal with CP Records in 2009 when he was in his mid-20s, and also released his first single and toured with Akon that year. In early 2010, Schaub was featured in Billboard magazine as one of the best up-and-coming Canadian artists. The rising star was last seen in Toronto in August of that year. He had recently completed work on some new music and a video, and he told his friends and family that he planned to travel to Mexico to take a 2-week break from his cell phone. Schaub fell off the radar around the time, with his last known Twitter activity being a birthday wish to an acquaintance in early September. It's unclear whether he ever went to Mexico. But when the planned travel dates came and went with continued radio silence, his family knew something was wrong. They reported him missing to the Toronto police, but the disappearance was initially kept quiet to avoid negatively affecting his music career. In November, after not hearing from him for months, Schaub's loved one reported him missing in Mexico and also started putting the word out that they were looking for him. He was never found, and his fate remains a complete mystery to this day. Number 3. Kay Flock. One day in 2021, 24-year-old Huáscar Hernandez was waiting to get his haircut at a barbershop in the Bronx when rising rap star Kay Flock allegedly walked by and asked him what he was looking at. The men got into an argument, according to authorities, who accused Flock of fatally opening fire on Hernandez during the confrontation. Flock, whose birth name is Kevin Perez, turned himself in a week after the shooting. The 19-year-old faces a first-degree murder charge, and in early 2023, he was hit with federal racketeering charges. He and 7 others are accused of running 2 Bronx-based gangs called Sev Side and Third Side. The U.S. Justice Department claims that between 2019 and 2022, the gangs collaborated indiscriminately to take out their rivals in the Belmont neighborhood and elsewhere throughout the Bronx and Manhattan, leaving entire communities terrorized by violence. They also allegedly referenced real-life acts of violence in their music and on social media. Sadly, Flock's decisions have derailed the talented teen from the promise of a successful rap career for now, and possibly for much longer depending on the outcome of his criminal cases. If convicted of the RICO charges, he'll face a mandatory life sentence in federal prison. A first-degree murder conviction could also mean life without parole. Number 2. Tim Dog. Hailing from the Bronx, Timothy Blair, better known as Tim Dog, made one of the first diss tracks that sparked the infamous East Coast-West Coast rap feud of the 1990s. Several of his early songs were critically acclaimed, but he eventually fell into the background. In 2011, Blair was accused of scamming a single mom from Mississippi out of $32,000. He met Esther Pilgrim online in 2007, and the pair began a long-distance relationship. Blair claimed he was trying to rebuild his music career and that he needed investors, and she generously used her credit card to help him out. When the case went to court, the forgotten rapper entered an Alford plea, which meant that he maintained his innocence, but admitted that the prosecution likely had enough evidence to secure a conviction. The judge ordered Blair to pay Pilgrim $19,000 in restitution in monthly $100 payments. Less than 2 years later, Pilgrim got a phone call informing her that the 46-year-old had passed away from diabetes complications. News of Blair's death spread quickly throughout the hip-hop community despite his status as a has-been. The media wasn't allowed at the funeral, which ended up being cancelled anyway. But there was a PayPal account eagerly taking donations for help with final expenses. The musician's passing remained heavily shrouded in mystery, leading to speculation that he may have faked his own death to get out of paying his debts to Pilgrim and possibly others. These suspicions only grew when searches for any records of Blair's death turned up empty-handed, and when a Mississippi prosecutor issued a warrant for his arrest. And Blair had a wife, but she was doing nothing to put the rumors to rest. Investigative reporters Dateline finally solved the mystery by calling funeral homes in the Atlanta area until they found one that had a record of the rapper's death. The business provided Blair's death certificate, which confirmed that he had died in 2013 after all, and that the county paid for his cremation. Nobody had known where to look for the record because nobody knew where he lived during his final days. No longer a national celebrity, his exit from the world was quiet, unglamorous, and largely unnoticed. And at number 1, Armani Kelly. In early 2023, 27-year-old aspiring rapper Armani Kelly drove 3 hours from his home in Oscoda, Michigan to Detroit to give his second live performance. He wasn't exactly a star yet. In fact, he had only recently gotten out of prison after serving 8 years for armed robbery. But his life was finally on a promising path as he pursued trade school and a musical career. During the drive up to the club with friends Montoya Givens and Dante Wicker, Kelly learned that the show was canceled due to technical issues. His fiancée, Taylor Perrin, said the trio planned to look for another venue to perform at. She knew something was very wrong when her text messages to Kelly stopped going through at around 9 o'clock that evening. The three were reported missing, and a multi-agency investigation was launched. Detroit Commander Michael McGinnis told the New York Times that it's highly unusual for more than one adult to go missing under the same exact circumstances. Law enforcement became increasingly perplexed as the days went by with no clue of what had happened. There'd been no activity on any of the men's phones since the night they vanished, and the car they were driving was located with no sign of the three. A teen who was found in possession of the vehicle was arrested, but it didn't seem to lead investigators any closer to answers. The following week, the remains of the three missing men were found buried in debris in a rat-infested basement of a decrepit, abandoned building near the venue Kelly had planned to perform at. They were shot to death, and it's unclear who might have done it or why. The investigation into the mysterious and heartbreaking case is ongoing. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be a forgotten famous person who went back to living a normal life after a short-lived bout of major success, or spend your entire career at a moderate level of fame, falling short of superstar status but making a consistent and comfortable living with your talents? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you soon.